Hello and welcome. That was in my notes. I forgot the welcome part. Welcome to ECV. Welcome to this lovely Sunday in this beautiful church. Last Sunday was my first Sunday in this church, and I confess that I was totally distracted by the beauty that is this rose window up there. And so if that happens to you, like I've been there, it's okay. We're all in this together. So if this is your first time joining ECV, either ever or in a little bit, over the course of the past month, our church has been working our way through a series on being called by God. What does it mean to be called by God? What does it look like? And how does that transform us? Josh has talked with us about what it means to be called by name, intimately and specifically by God. What it means to be called by tribe, that we are each representatives of various groups that God loves and is trying to reach through us. And his call is for communities of people to come and know him. And last week we talked about what it means to be called to serve. That as we respond to the call of God to serve others, we must first respond to God's call to serve us. This Called series has been on to some pretty good stuff, and it's exactly the sort of thing that you would want to hear if you were in the middle of a transition, whether it's moving to a new city, beginning a new school year, or finding a new building. The message of the specific ways that God sees us and knows us and loves us is stunning. It should halt us in our very tracks. It's that stunning. And it's with these talks behind us that we'll be looking at what it means to be called to grace. Called to grace. But before that, let me share with you a guilty pleasure. I love to watch a singing competition show called The Voice. And typically, I'm not really one for reality TV shows. In fact, I have verbalized and vocalized a lot of judgment regarding reality TV shows. But I love The Voice. I love it. I can't get enough of it. And primarily, the thing that I love most about The Voice are these earlier rounds in the show called the blind auditions. And if you're unfamiliar with the show, I'm going to unpack it a little bit. But in the blind auditions, there are 4 coaches, and they're all noteworthy recording artists. They're exactly who you would want to listen to if you were trying to make it big in the biz. I watch The Voice, so I can call it the biz. And they listen to their contestants in chairs that are facing the opposite direction of the stage, so they can avoid seeing the contestants as they audition, so they can judge them solely on their voice. Before the contestant auditions, of course, the viewers learn a little bit about their lives. A lot of it is NBC playing into the sad stories, I think a little too much if I were to criticize the show the tiniest bit. But you hear about the struggles they faced, how long they've been waiting for their big break, and the no's that they've heard. The things that they've heard that's you're never going to make it, you're not good enough, and how that's deeply wounded and impacted them. And then they sing. This is kind of the best part. They sing, and in the course of the audition, the judges individually decide if the person auditioning is talented enough to merit joining their team. And it looks like this. So when they judge that yes, you're good enough, they hit this red button, and the chair turns around, and beneath the chair is this sign that says, "I want you." And this is where, on multiple occasions, I have cried. I kid you not, I have cried watching The Voice. At first, I thought it was a little bit of a fluke, just a rough day, or just a little more emotional than usual. And then it happened again, and I was like, okay, something's up. And then it happened again. And I'm not used to crying in general, let alone at The Voice. What's wrong with me? And then I realized what precisely was wrong with me. I realized that the premise of The Voice is that you're judged solely on the one thing that matters, your ability to sing. That all of the other ways that you may have been judged in the past, your age, your looks, your race, anything that blinded people, others, or even yourself from recognizing your God-given talent, All of those things are hidden from the judges. They're the people who are the experts in the field, the people who know if you're going to make it. And then when they hear you sing with passion and with power, and they hit that red button, and the I want you sign lights up, it turns out you have a chance in the competition. Where every place that you heard a no or you're not quite good enough, you now get an I want you from someone who can actually make your dreams come true. And it's at this point that I cry multiple times. And I cry because I think that this is actually a small picture of what it means to be called to grace. But what is grace? Grace is the love of God shown to the unlovely, the peace of God given to the restless, the unmerited favor of God. John Stott says that grace is love that cares and stoops and rescues. That grace is unconditional love toward a person who does not deserve it. Grace, according to The Voice, is this: that in every place in our lives where we've heard a no or not good enough, or those trials didn't matter, or where you've been marked by failure, where we stand to audition before Jesus, what we get is a resounding I want you before we even sing a note. This is the grace that calls us, and a grace that puts an entirely new song on our lips, whether or not we can even carry a tune. And so today, we are going to be looking at a parable that Jesus tells his disciples. They've been thrown into a little bit of a tizzy, wondering how they're going to know what they deserve, following their interaction with a man who's rich and moral, but still walks away from Jesus because he was unwilling to give away the things that he thought made him good. And so Jesus tells this parable of the workers in the vineyard in Matthew 20. And the parable of the workers in the vineyard is a picture of what I think it means to be called to God's grace. And I think we see the call of grace demonstrated in two main ways. The first is the grace of being called to respond to the offer to work after being discarded as unuseful. And the second is the grace of being called to receive good gifts from God. Gifts from God, as if there were any other kind of gift from God. So these are the two main things that we're going to look at today: how to respond and how to receive. 2 R's. It's like the first time I've ever pulled that off. So we're going to look at Matthew 20, and before I do, I'm just going to pray for us. So Jesus, we need you. We need you to know how to respond and receive the grace that you offer us. Help us to be exactly who we need to be sitting here today. Not people who pretend to have it all together or people who feel okay, but Lord, that you have far more for us today than just that. Give us the exact thing that we need from you. In Jesus' name, amen. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them to his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired, going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those who came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. These who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Yikes. Okay, so in this parable, Jesus talks about a landowner who needs workers for his vineyard and goes into town multiple times and hires people throughout the day. A day laborer would have been someone without their own land to work, and the men remaining idle and standing around would not have been hired by any other landowner. They probably would have been less qualified, less able. Likely they were the weak and the sick, the disabled, the elderly, maybe even a few drunks and criminals thrown in the bunch. And these workers hired at 5 p.m., an hour before the end of the workday, would have been the worst of the leftover crew. On top of whatever would have disqualified them from being a good worker in the first place, it also seems like they were a little bit lazy, not even really trying to get hired. In the parable, some work all day, others half day, others a quarter day, and still others for just 1 hour. And at the end of the day, the landowner does 2 things that reveal his grace. First, he pays the last people he hired first, those who only worked an hour before anyone else. And second, he pays them a full day's wages. He then proceeds to pay everyone else the exact same amount, including those who had worked all day long, as they are sure to tell us, under the heat of the day. And while apparently those who worked less than a full day respond gratefully by accepting the grace of the landowner and then apparently going on their merry way, there is an angry and visceral response to those who are paid last. Jesus says that they grumbled against the landowner and they complained to his face. These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us. These grumbling workers feel entitled to more. And in reading this parable, in the way that we understand basic justice to work, how could they not? How could they not grumble? I would grumble. We know the frustration that comes when we're cut in line, when recognition for a job well done is handed off to someone else, when we work above and beyond what's asked and a thank you isn't even offered. We feel slighted and indignant when we don't feel we get what we deserve. Shaking off our sense of deservedness is like trying to shake off a spider web that we've walked into. Only we don't really want to shake it off anyway. We want to feel wronged. And in this case, we want to feel wronged by the generosity of God. But this isn't a parable, actually, that's about the workers and what they deserve. The emphasis in this parable is on the landowner, the character who represents God, and the downright scandal of his generosity. The parable turns our expectations regarding what we deserve for our degrees of service to God and leaves those expecting a bonus for putting in extra hours, extra emphasis of labor, outraged that they would be paid the same as the hooligans who loafed about for 1 hour of work. And when confronted with this injustice, the landowner speaks not of an arrangement in which each is paid what he deserves for his portion of the work, but instead speaks of his authority over his own graciousness and the envy that he receives for his generosity. The point of this story is that the kind of love that the Bible is about cannot be earned. It can only be given. And it can only be given by a good and generous and gracious God. And this sort of overly generous, unconditionally loving God is the one that Jesus is trying to introduce to his followers in so many of the parables that he tells. In Matthew 18, when he cancels out the debt of his servants. In Luke 15, when he leaves the 99 sheep for the one. Again, in Luke 15, in the parable of the lost son, who treats his father as though he were dead, squanders his wealth, and then is welcomed back with an embrace and a 2-week-long party. Over and over again, we see a picture of a God, our God, who shows his generosity and his love toward us, not because of anything we can offer him or any way that we can prove ourselves, but simply because it is in his nature to do so. And he always shows generosity to us, and it is always at great cost to himself. Now, a few years ago, as part of an ECV home group, I read this parable and found myself, perhaps like you, filled with more than a little bit of rage. It wasn't anger, it was rage. And we were using in this home group an Ignatian style of reading the Bible. And the assignment for this passage was similar to the others in that we were to be still in our time of reading the Bible and become aware of the presence of God. Then we were to read the passage over several times in a contemplative mind, really drawing ourselves into this story, imagining ourselves in it. Who would we be? Where would we be? What are the sights and the smells and the sounds? And in the course of imagining ourselves in this story, in this parable, we were supposed to pay attention to our emotional reaction and then discuss that with God and talk about what was going on there. And so far, this style of reading the Bible had been going really well for me. I was like, this is great, love this. And then we got to this parable. And I read it once, and I kind of thought nothing special about the passage. And then I read it again, and I felt a little uneasy. Just felt a little uneasy. And then I read it a third time, and I was filled with this rage. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you in the context of anything religious, especially reading the Bible, but it's uncomfortable to feel anger in reading the Word of God. That's not typically how that's supposed to go. In my mind, it was oh yeah, filled with peace and joy. Anger, rage, this is out of nowhere. And so, following directions as I obediently do, I took my rage to God and I prayer yelled at him for the injustice served to the people who show up first. And if you haven't prayer yelled before, I highly recommend it. And I realized, of course, that in the course of talking this through in a one-sided way with God, that I clearly identified with the first set of workers. I remember saying things to God, if you knew how hard I worked, if you knew how many miles I drive, how many, ungrateful kids I sit down with, how many times, I've lost this, only to see, other people getting something else, and it pains me to say these things out loud to you now, and just trying to tell God how much I deserved a raise, effectively, a raise of his grace, of his love. And finally, when sort of the rage had burned out and I had nothing left to say, there's sort of this stillness and this quiet. And then in a very sort of even way, I heard God say, "It's cute that you think you're in the first group of workers." And that was it. I was just oh, I'm gutted. It's cute that you think that. Jesus, in telling this parable to his followers, cuts down the middle of the crowd, cuts through the disciples, but not in the way that we expect. We expect the line to fall between those who have pleased God, those who've performed well, met their quota of helping little old ladies cross the street, showed up enough at church, perhaps even serve in the church, pay their taxes, or just generally good human beings. and those who have utterly failed to contribute anything good, or enough good, but probably anything good. The lazy, hapless riffraff who cannot get their act together. That's where we expect the line to fall. But instead, we see the line fall between those who understand and receive the grace of God and those who don't. The point of this story is to see that God is not one who dispenses wages, but one who gives gifts extravagantly, recklessly, unceasingly. He's not a God who dispenses wages when we do a good thing, but a God who gives gifts, primarily the gift of himself. What we hear in the parable of the workers in the field is a call to grace, a call to see the real character of God, not the one that we've created. This parable about the nature of the generosity of God, we hear both the great offense and the great relief of the good news, that we are not paid according to what we deserve or how good we think we are, because none of us comes close to even meeting our own standards, let alone God's. And yet we all hear this invitation in this parable to respond to the call to come and work, to receive purpose and generosity and identity from a God who sees us and knows us and loves us. He sees us fully in every way that we exist, in our best days and our worst, and he calls us anyway. He calls us anyway. He knows us more intimately and more perfectly than we could ever know, and he calls us anyway. The point of this story is not to see God as one who dispenses wages, but one who gives gifts extravagantly, recklessly, and unceasingly. And I imagine now a group of men standing around in a small town in the middle of the day, kicking the dirt out of frustration that once again they have failed to be hired. Once again, they don't know if they can put a meal on the table for their family. Once again, just feeling the worthlessness that comes with joblessness. And they've seen other friends and neighbors go off to work. They've seen other people be asked to work other lands. And each way that they are deficient or see themselves as a bad investment or just are a bad investment has been highlighted for them each time someone else goes away, because they see they are not as good as that other person. And as they realize, perhaps, that they have nothing to offer, they choose to put on a little bit more of the identity that's been placed upon them in this circumstance, one of worthlessness and self-condemnation. And just as they are about to call it a day, a landowner comes and asks them if they want to work. No promise of what they'll be paid, but just that they're valuable enough that the landlord wants them to work, even for an hour. That they aren't worthless, they have something to offer. Will they respond to this call of grace? Will you? This is the call of grace that begs a response. It begs following after the landlord in response. It's one where we can either choose to stay where we are in the identity that we've been given, or one where we can get up and follow after, not knowing what comes next. Brennan Manning, if you are at all curious about grace, check out Brennan Manning. He says this: the gospel of grace obliterates the two-class citizenship theory operative in many American churches. For grace proclaims the awesome truth that all is gift, that all that is good is ours, not by right, but by the sheer bounty of a gracious God. Jesus comes not for the super spiritual, but for the wobbly and the weak-kneed, who know that they don't have it all together and who are not too proud to accept the handout of amazing grace. Do you know this grace? Because this grace knows you. We can respond to the call of grace, and we can receive the call to grace. So I'm terrible, well, generally, but also specifically, at receiving generosity or help really of any kind. If you have known me probably for any length of time, this will have been made apparent to you. And for some reason, one of the main ways that this rears its ugly head is when a gentleman offers to carry my luggage for me. I think it's probably bound up in some like feminist gender identity stuff, and that's for another talk entirely. But I always insist on carrying the bag myself. It's like, I can do this. Why would you think that I'm like too weak to carry this? And then after I carry the bag, or some portion of carrying the bag, I'm like, oh, I should have just let someone help me. Like, why didn't I let them help me? Of course, only admitting this to myself, never out loud, except for now, of course. And a few years ago, following the refusal for help with a particularly heavy bag, my friend John turned to me and said, Liz, I know that you can lift the bag. The issue at hand is not whether or not you are strong. The issue at hand is why you won't let me help you. Please just let me help you carry this for a while. The call to grace from Jesus is one that gently offers to us, please lay down your burdens, lay them down here, and let me carry them for a while. That we are struggling beneath the weight of our ambitions, our anxieties, our shames, our guilts, our self-hatred. That we are struggling under the burden of proving our worth and striving for perfection. And that this can be just as heavy as shouldering the guilt and shame of knowing that we can never measure up. We may be used to carrying these bags. We may have built up some sort of strength or toughness or pride, as it usually is in my case, in carrying these things. But the truth is that we are simply not strong enough to bear the burden on our own. While we may be able to muster the strength to carry it for a while, as the weight increases, as it always does, we find that we need help to carry it. But the trouble is, if we pass off the weight of these things to Jesus, if we allow him to carry these weighty things for us, it means that he has access. He's access to the things. He might find something hidden in the proverbial bag that we want to carry and shoulder ourselves. We worry that if who we really are becomes exposed, that the good news of the gospel will prove too good to be true. That Jesus will drop us like the bad habit that we really are. And this is the precise place, friends, this is the precise place where we need to receive the grace that we are called to. And the call to grace is one that thunders that the God of the universe, who has made himself known to us in the person of Jesus Christ, knows your whole life story, knows my whole life story, and loves us anyway. He loves us anyway. He loves us unconditionally as we are in this very moment. He's not waiting for us to get our act together. He's not waiting for us to show up earlier in the day to be put to work. He's not waiting for us to work harder to prove our merit and our worth. He loves us as we are, where we are, not as the people we should be. He loves us immediately in the present moment. That God sees our whole lives, the moments where we've experienced great joys and great pains, the moments where we've dared to risk, and the moments when we've hidden in shadows. He's seen all of the wrong turns you've made in your life, all of the moments of sin and brokenness, all of the acts of selfishness and fear. God knows all of these. And yet, he loves you. He loves you beyond comprehension, beyond all hope. He loves you in an offensively reckless and generous way. No matter what you've done, who you've been, where you are, God cannot help but love you. He loves you because he made you. He loves you intimately, knowing every skeleton you have in your closet. He loves you uniquely as you really are, specifically by name. He loves you as someone who is full of contradictions, full of fears and hopes. He loves you reliably. He will never let you down. He will never abandon you. He will never forsake you. He will never leave you. God loves you in such a way that he surrendered all that was his in heaven and came down to earth so that you would know him intimately and personally. And he loves you in such a way that he would rather die than to be without you. But there's a difference between knowing this call and receiving this call to grace. Because when we receive it, we experience it. There's a dynamic change. And a difference between hearing about grace while still carrying a heavy load and feeling the sweet relief that comes when a burden is lifted and knowing that every trouble that you have is in the hands of one who is far more capable and trustworthy than even your own. The difference is striking. And it's a difference between telling Jesus how tired you are from carrying a heavy load and handing it over to him, for him to carry and for him to lead you. And the difference is one that is marked by joy, where a deep weariness, a deep unrest is lifted. One where you're eager for more of this grace that you have just had a taste of. And I would imagine that this is the experience of the workers who receive a full day's wage when they don't even know what to expect for payment. We're coming back here and we're going to work tomorrow if this is the sort of landowner you are. Wait, let me go tell my friends. Let me tell my friends about this sort of landowner who would take a risk on someone like me and give me far more than I ever could deserve. Grace, when received, will upend and wreck your life. Grace, when received, begins the work of transforming us from the inside out, making us tender and compassionate in a way that only comes from a deep understanding of knowing how boundlessly you are loved. But we resist grace because, as Flannery O'Connor says, grace changes us and change is painful. And friends, I have seen more than a glimpse of the grace of God in my life. His deep and passionate love for me, one that I most definitely do not deserve, one that I can never earn. The more I get to know it, the more I see I could never possibly earn it. And the more I see of it, the more I want it displayed in my life. I want the grace of God to infect every fiber of my being. That the more that I experience the unbearable, sometimes forgiveness and love of God, the love of a heavenly Father who loves me as I am and into the person that he is making me, the more I want of him. The more I want, the more I see of God's grace, the more I want. But the good thing that we've learned from this parable is that God is generous, offensively so. That I am called to grace by name, that I'm called to grace by tribe, and I'm called to grace to serve. But it's only when I respond and that I receive this grace that I am called to that I could ever step forward into those things. And so, friends, I say this to you as much to myself. But will you let Jesus come to you, a God who is full of grace and mercy and generosity? Will you let him love you as you are and not as you should be? But let him love you so radically, so deeply that you are transformed in the very core of who you are, beyond your wildest dreams or expectations. Will you receive this call to grace? Will you respond to this call to grace? A grace that turns around and says, I want you, before you even sing a garbled note. So at this point, I'd like to invite up the worship team. And I'm going to pray for us And as the worship team makes their way up here, the way that I want us to pray today is one where we, like I described in the Ignatian style, is where we become aware of the presence of God, that God is here and that he is doing something. He's doing something within each one of you. And so I would love for each of you to posture yourselves in whatever way you need to receive, to close your eyes, to kneel, to sit, to stand, and to respond in whatever way you need to, whether it is one of a prayerful yelling or one of a quiet wonder. To posture yourself to receive the call of grace, that in faith, becoming aware of the Jesus who is near you and with you and for you. And in this, don't think, don't intend, don't promise to perform anything. This isn't up to you to make something happen. This is to grow still and become aware and to allow Jesus to come to you, to let yourself be loved as you are in your brokenness, and not as you think you should be. Okay, let us pray. So, Lord, come and be with us. Reveal to us the need that we have for your grace. Let it permeate every cell of our being, every fear and dream. And Lord, come to us. Be with us. And Lord, I pray that out of your glorious riches, that you would strengthen each of us with your power through your Spirit. Strengthen us in our inner being so that Jesus may dwell in our hearts through faith. Lord, and I pray that we, being rooted and established in love, that we would have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know that this love surpasses knowledge, that we would be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Now to you, God, who is able to do immeasurably more than all that we ask or imagine, according to your power that is at work within us, to you be the glory in the church and in Christ throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. Now, as we move into a time of communion, as we continue to respond to the things that God is doing, come and receive from him. Come to the table. That as you come and receive from Jesus, whether it's for the first time or the 100th time, come and receive the good news of his grace, of his love, and let it meet you. Let it meet you like it can for the first time. Use this as a symbol of saying, yes, God, I want more of your grace. I need more of your grace.